Remember, the goal here is to create a business strategy infused with data and analytics. It's not a data strategy of old. It's not an analytics strategy, because for a long time, organizations have thought about data analytics strategy, quite honestly, as program planning. They've asked questions like, well, what kind of data and what kind of analysis do you need with that, the thing that you've already decided to do? And we need to change that conversation about data. We need to explore, with this data, with this analysis, how could we fundamentally change what we do? How could we change our business model? How could we change all different aspects of how we work? So remember, your goal is a business strategy infused with data and analytics. Next key issue is, what is a compelling vision and what 4 questions must your strategy answer? Well, the first thing is a data-driven vision. And your data-driven vision is that signpost on the road, the thing that you're really trying to achieve as an enterprise as you start to become a data-driven enterprise. And you want to make sure that you create that vision, that it's more than just a slogan, and we have a recipe for that we'll talk about in just a moment. But there's also deeper analysis that you could do in order to really drill into this data-driven vision. Environmental scan is a phrase from long-standing, where you start to look at external factors like different trends, different economic trends, other kinds of things that are impacting your strategy. Business model analysis. You can use Gartner's business model framework, or you can use business model canvas to pick apart your business model, both in public and private sector. And with that, you're trying to be really intentional about looking at all of your data analytic assets at a high level, of course, and are we applying them to the best of our ability in each of those business model components? Gives you a way to start to identify not only places where you've really undervalued your data analytic assets, but also where you could really go after them with key opportunities that you want to play after. So the goal is start with a vision, even among your own teammates, and make sure that you're incorporating that as part of the story that you're telling as you're going out and visiting different business peers. Then even get them to collaborate in that, refine it, and then start adding these other types of analysis that you're doing to help promote some of the curiosity within inside of that space. When you look at a vision, these are some examples of good vision statements. With the example of the pharmaceutical company, we strive for a world where information provides actionable insight to prevent, detect, and predict diseases of all kinds and improve people's lives. You might say, well, that kind of sounds like a slogan, but it's really not. For this company, they were in the business of actually just coming up with new treatments. So they really thought it would be groundbreaking if they got into the prevention, the detection, and the prediction of diseases of all kinds. They really felt that that would have an impact on people's lives, and not only that, but on their business. So that is the kind of thing that you want to capture that says, no, this is different than the play that we've been making in the market for a long time. This is different than how we have been working. So when you look at how to put together a vision statement, formats on the bottom, blue box, a format of a well-developed vision statement. We contribute to these strategic goals for these stakeholders by doing these 3 things. And this simple format helps you think about kind of the critical components. Of course, do your wordsmithing, play with it so that it starts to sound like your vision, not just a formulaic one. But also look at these examples for what's missing in each one, and make sure you're not stepping on a typical problem that we see with vision statements, where they tend to be very slogan oriented and not that meaningful. So spend some time actually developing your vision so that it's at least as part of your talk track, and then refining that as you go. The next piece of the puzzle, though, is answering these 4 questions. And this comes into play with both the stakeholder outcome analysis as well as the value proposition analysis. But these 4 questions are really at the essence of strategy. Who are our stakeholders, both internally and externally? What are their goals in business and in life? When we say business and in life, we have a very specific thought process we're thinking about where, you're not just trying to give a diabetics patient an ability to read their blood glucose level. You're trying to help them cope with their chronic care condition. They might have a goal to be healthy. They might have a goal for other types of things. And it's in these kinds of examinations where you start to find new opportunities. You also have to do number 3. What initiatives generate the most business outcome value contributing to those stakeholder goals? And how are you going to measure the result? Now, measuring the result is not just your activity, not just saying we improved 10 fields, that had poor quality, and that's what we did. No, what you have to identify is what are the business outcomes that you're affecting. So if you think about those stakeholder goals and outcomes, those are the things that you're trying to measure. How are we going to determine that that was true? And also that our contribution actually did make a contribution. So in the example of that, you'd have a use case that was developing a prediction for next best action. And as part of that, you might divide the group into the test group and the control group and be able to actually illustrate that for the ones that you offered that to, that they had a lift of revenue by some percentage. So you're constantly thinking about all 4 of these questions as you go through these next 2 pieces. So the first one is stakeholder outcomes. And like I said, at most basic level, you're trying to identify internal and external stakeholder and their outcomes that they're going after. So if you're talking to somebody and they say that they want to improve margin by 10%, they've given you something really important. They've told you what they want to do and how much they want to improve. So you now have a measure of success associated with that outcome. But the actual outcome statement that you're going to write down yourself and put into your head is, we need to do margin optimization. And the reason that you're getting that more general form is because that'll have long-lasting kind of value to you. You can come back to that and say, last year we worked on margin optimization. We were able to improve that by 10% based on your target then. What's your new target for margin optimization? And how do we start to look at greater complexity in that to be able to do margin optimization better? So it helps you actually uncover these kinds of discussions that you can have on an ongoing basis with your stakeholders. But another really critical part of strategy is not just figuring out what you're doing with people today that adds value, but really starting to push on unmet needs. With stakeholder analysis, you want to start doing things like customer journey mapping, not just to identify the customer journey and its friction points, which tend to remove pain in that relationship. You want to look for what's the new opportunity plays. So as an example, when you start to look at the stakeholder analysis, if you focus your attention on the center, you'll see the customer need, activity, and life. Now, the reality is that when you start to do stakeholder analysis, you're certainly going to have different personas for your customers. You're going to have, if you're operating a transportation system, you're going to have Mike, the morning commuter, and you're going to have Mike, the visitor to our city. And with those, you're going to have different types of needs and activities and goals that people have associated with that. So with my example from before, with the diabetic patient, the need was read my blood glucose level and be able to just understand what that means to me. But the activity gets into managing my chronic care condition. And is there a play for your organization stepping up and playing in that unmet need? Maybe you're in farming, and like with some farming manufacturers, they've been in the labor replacement business for a long time. They add predictive maintenance to their equipment so that it keeps it in operation more often and removes unplanned downtime. But they're still in fundamentally the business of labor replacement. But then you have some that have taken their machinery, captured all that data, started to do analysis to it, because they realize that that tells them something really important about every seedling in the field. And as a result, they can pursue farmer profitability and crop yield improvements rather than just labor replacement. Changes the business model, but all done with data and analytics. These are the kinds of things that you have to uncover as part of your data analytics strategy. How are we going to start addressing unmet needs, both internally and externally, that really add tremendous value?